So, hello everyone. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for our next TEIS session in December. And so, this session we're going to focus on the work of our colleagues in Africa. And so, without further ado, welcome everyone. Just a note on engagement etiquette. Personal attacks, if there's any instances of that, you will be removed from the session. But in any case, thank you, everyone. We are amongst colleagues. And this is a rare opportunity for us in December to engage with our colleagues who've done a lot of work in Africa. So, and we have two speakers here. The first is Dr. Ayman El-Sheikh, and the second is Shadia Mansour, our colleague, who's one of the leaders at TESOL as well. And so without going further into introductions, I want to first say congratulations to Africa TESOL. It's been only since 2015. And so Ayman and Shadia, what are your roles in Africa TESOL? If you could tell us a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much, Farida, for inviting us and for organizing this webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are pleased to have you here. Just by way of introducing Africa TESOL, which has recently undergone a name change from Africa TESOL to Africa ELTA, and ELTA stands for English Language Teachers Association. So we felt that after several conversations and discussions with colleagues, members, and affiliate leaders, that the name TESOL doesn't reflect who we are and what we do. So we thought that we needed a new name in order to reflect our identity. First of all, we are an association, and we wanted the word association in our name. Second of all, Africa TESOL has 22 affiliates, and most of our affiliates have the words English Teachers Association in their title. So we wanted to be close in terms of name to our affiliates, so that we are not far from their names, so that we are engaged with them and are close to what they are doing as well, and how they see us, and how we represent them as well. So my current role in Africa TESOL is that I'm the current president of Africa TESOL, and I will stop here.
You're the current president. You're I think president number 3 of this new young Africa TESOL. Africa ELTA. Right. And Shadia, your role in the organization?
Well, currently I am a member of Africa TESOL, one of the very first members, and I am particularly an advocate of Africa TESOL from the very first days until right now. So I put on under the radar efforts with my very dear colleagues and friends, Ayman and Okan. And that's how I contribute. So I do not have a leadership position, but you know how language associations require a lot of volunteering, right? That you don't necessarily see what they're doing, but I am one of those people who do work that you don't see much.
Yes, I mean, I think we'll talk about volunteers down the road, the importance of them in this association, as well as advocates. The behind the scene advocates are incredibly important from what I've read here in terms of the work. So let's get to the crux of the discussion today. Is Africa ELTA / TESOL, Ayman, different from other language teaching associations that you know of? You've traveled the world, you've been a part of so many other associations that's affiliated with TESOL. How is Africa's TESOL, Africa ELTA, the work there is similar or different to that of others? Very
Yes, there are
clear.
certainly similarities and there are also differences. I'm going to highlight how we are different from other associations that exist. The first difference relates to the composition of our board. We are, the Africa ELTA is run by 7 volunteers. And these 7 volunteers come from 6 different African countries. So when we select board members, we try to take into consideration the geographic spread. So this is what makes us different from other associations. In addition to that, we are very aware of gender issues in language teacher associations. And currently we have 4 female board members and 3 male board members. So another consideration we take when we compose the board is that we need to have some gender balance as well. So this differentiates us from other teacher associations.
Well, one of the things I was reading your article, Ayman, and one of the comments that you cited, Padwad 2016, was saying that one of the issues that emerged from the research on language teacher associations is the Western versus non-Western conceptions of language teacher associations. What is your comment about that? I mean, since you included, Padwad in your research, what is that saying about your association? Is there a non-Western, is there a dichotomy?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Badwad, when he mentioned that, he referred to a teacher association in India, and he talked about how the national culture of India and the culture of charity influenced the work of the association. And I can also see that in Africa ELTA, as we come from different African countries, so there are different cultures that come into play, and these cultures influence the way we operate and the work that we do. So, but in terms of composition of board members, as I mentioned earlier, we seek diversity, whether it is gender diversity or cultural or national diversity. So this is the defining feature of Africa TESOL. But the point to drive home here is that Africa TESOL has different cultures represented in it, and that shapes the way we do our work in Africa ELTA.
Give us one example as to what that shaping is like. I mean, what is it that you do that reflects the diversity of the membership, of the leadership? You have 6 countries
Right.
Involved.
Right. Yeah, so interpersonal communication is one of the examples that I can share with you. When we are communicating among each other, we have to understand each other, where we come from, so on and so forth. Another example that I can give you is our awareness of the need to include people from diverse backgrounds, especially from African origins, in the activities that we do. And this is why our plenary speakers at conferences always come from African countries or from African descent. So these are a couple of examples that show how the role of culture influence what we do.
Okay. Now, Chadia, one of the things that you mentioned is your volunteering work
Mhm,
in Africa TESOL, now Africa ELTA,
mhm,
right? I mean,
mhm,
you are also very much involved with our TESOL organization here in
mhm,
North America.
mhm.
Is your work with Africa TESOL different? I mean, or similar? Or I mean, how is that volunteering work? How is that?
Well,
You're coming in from the ground level, so.
right. Well, I think it's a little different because, well, the motive is the same. You want to help, right? You want to help teachers. You want to help the organization. You want to help the field. So the motive is the same, but the challenges are different, and the composition also is different.
Mhm.
Um, and with Africa TESOL in particular, it's a regional association, and as Ayman was talking about, all those different countries have their own ways of their cultures, own ways of thinking ideas. I maybe represent the North African side of, how I see things could be done, or the needs would be from my own perspective. So in the brainstorming and the volunteering that I do, and the brainstorming with Akhan or Ayman, and others, Amira Salama as well, or Hind. These are also female leaders. We have different ways of thinking about things. And I think particularly that brainstorming is extremely important, because for you to, whether to come up with topics or events or plans for the association, everybody comes from a different brings in a different perspective and insight. I think that's very, very important, especially the Africa TESOL or ELTA right now is new, right? So we're still in the process of trying to figure out or they build a solid base of how we could serve all those different cultures within the region. It's not an easy task to
It's not
do.
universal, yeah. So
Yeah.
along those lines, before
Mhm.
we get back to the research, is that what is one distinctive need that you see in Northern Africa? You're from Tunisia
Mm,
originally. What is one professional development need in your in Northern Africa or in Tunisia that you see needs to be addressed?
well, I think teacher training is particularly of importance in North Africa, because I know colleagues in Algeria as well, from Libya, Morocco. The way we graduate, yes, but we kind of have more of a French st- system,
Mhm.
when we had our BA, for instance, of a lot of theories, but there's a lot of, the practice part was missing, and it's still missing. So I believe those who earn degrees, as language teachers, are still in need of training in terms of classroom practice, putting those theories into practice. I think that is something very, very needed in North Africa in
Okay.
particular.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's
Mhm.
a little bit of a disturbance in your sound, Shadia.
Really?
And so, but that's not too bad. We can hear you. And
Okay.
so so professional development indeed is a very very it's a strong need in I think across the board, and therefore associations like us exist for that very purpose. And so I think what's also interesting, I think, Shadia, what you just said and what Iman's research is demonstrating through the findings, I'm going to refer to the findings, Iman and Shadia, that there are a lot of findings in this research. And from, for instance, when you and your colleagues, Iman, interviewed teachers or surveyed teachers, you know, the three things emerge, or more than three things emerge, but the ones that we saw was, networking. Your association enabled such extensive networking across the diverse areas of Africa. And the other is the practical ideas that people were getting, plus
Mhm.
professional development as Shadi was saying, and I was also intrigued by this notion of self-awakening. That's one of your findings. Do you want to talk about the findings of that research and you know those findings that you have? You know, I found self-awakening quite quite unique in terms of what your research uncovered. But if you want to talk about any of those findings or focus on one of them, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question. So the study Ocon and I conducted uh, basically relates to how Africa ELTA, Africa TESOL then, and its affiliates promote professional development of their members. And the motivation for the study was the lack of literature in the area, in the field. There are very little studies that have been conducted on LTAs because generally they are viewed as service provider as opposed to knowledge generators. Uh, so the study focused on the perceptions of members of Africa ELTA and affiliates of Africa ELTA, as well as leaders of the affiliates of Africa ELTA. We surveyed them and asked them questions that relate to professional development activity that they had recently attended and how they benefited from that activity. And as you mentioned, Farida, many of them reported that they had benefited from the themes and topics that were discussed. Some of them took away practical applications. Others benefited from networking, not only from people from the same country, but from other countries as well. And some of them were actually awakened to this idea that by attending this session, we now know what we need to work on in order to develop not only as a professional, but also as a person. So this is, in brief, the summary of the findings of the survey. The interviews that we conducted were conducted with affiliate leaders, and we talked about the goals of their associations, the activities that they engage in, the challenges they face, and their affiliation with Africa ELTA. And similar to other language teacher associations, most of them are there to promote and provide professional development for their members. But they also encounter a host of challenges. And I believe we will discuss those later on. They range from financial challenges to challenges that relate to volunteerism, so on and so forth. And they all engaged in very rich activities in order to develop their members professionally. They didn't only rely on conferences, but they also had other activities going on. In some associations involved students in their activities as well. Other associations organized blood drives and cleaning campaigns.
Wow.
So that's a very different, and they expanded, actually in that article we talk about how they expanded the traditional definition of language teacher associations provided by LAM.
Right. Well, that's unique. You know, blood drives. I don't think ever. You know, and I think donations, right, engagement, and
Right,
even the education of young children too.
right.
You know, who were attending the sessions. I think
Mhm.
that's incredibly unique.
If I may add here,
Yes.
Farida, to I think what Ayman was talking about in the results of the research that he conducted with Akan, this self uh, awakening part, right? I think one of the very unique and one of the reasons behind that is this a vision that Ayman and Akan has had since the start of, cultivating nationals per se, or teachers with potentials and leaders, and supporting novice teachers and leaders in producing knowledge and being active, and doing things for themselves and for their communities that fit their needs and context, and mentoring leadership in a sustainable way. That was the vision, right? I think there have been, through their events, through their composition of leadership, through their planning, they have been seeking ways of how do we get into those communities, and how can we get into those people, instead of having a top-down approach, as many other language or teacher associations. Africa TESOL and Africa Alta right now has had this bottom-up approach from
Mm,
day one.
mm,
I think that's very unique.
mhm. I think so too. I mean,
Yeah.
what comes through with the research is the community work
Mm-hmm.
that Africa TESOL slash ELTA
So, mhm.
is engaging in terms of their activities. It's remarkable. But however, since you raised, Ayman, some of the issues of challenges, one of the things I read in your article too is the comment that's raised by Aubrey and Coombe, which is that English LTAs um, are invisible. Are they invisible in Africa? And what does that say about the status of English language teaching in the country, or as a profession, oh, in the continent, I should say, or
Mhm.
at least in the association from what you've been able to see?
Right, yeah. So as I mentioned before, the research on language teacher associations is invisible, not only in Africa, but in all over the world. There is lack of research on how these associations function and provide for their members. In terms of invisibility of language teacher associations in Africa, I wouldn't say they are invisible, as there are currently a lot of associations in Africa. Those that are affiliated with Africa ELTA are 22, and there are many more that are not affiliated with Africa ELTA. So the work of these associations is to some extent visible to the teachers and to the members of this association. And this tells us that the English language as a profession is a thriving profession, and Africa is a thriving market for English language teaching if we want to view it from that lens. And these associations work very hard in order to train and provide professional development for their teachers, although they have many challenges that they encounter. And in some countries, these challenges may make some associations invisible.
Mhm, mhm. Chadia, do you want to add any comment to that in terms of the work of language teacher associations, because you work from the ground level, right, and in all the organizations, and so the visibility of language teacher associations, the visibility of English language teachers in your part of the world as well. You have other languages
Mhm.
that are at play,
Mhm.
and teacher of other different, coming in teaching different languages in
Right.
addition to English. So
Right.
can you add to what Ayman just said?
I think yes, the invisible part of the invisibility, whether for me like teaching English to speakers of other languages or teaching Arabic as a foreign language as well in the U.S. and attending many different conferences as well. I think part of the invisibility is the shortage of it's money for teachers, right? Personally, I wouldn't have discovered that there, TESOL, for instance, international, or the Arabic language conferences and so on and so forth. Um, if I did not have the support of my supervisors, so it starts at your education, training, and your own education. If you have somebody to tell you about that or not, to direct you, to guide you, that you should be involved, that there are things like that. I wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have known about them. That's one. And the money part, if I didn't have money to travel, to be a member at least, that yearly fee that you pay or to attend, you can't. You
Mm-hmm.
can't do things. You cannot contribute. You cannot even know about them sometimes. So it's your education, it's your training. Who's going to introduce you to that? So networking/networking rate, who's going to lead you into them? And do you have the resources to even take part in
Right.
those, whether to receive or to produce the
Yep.
same?
Yep. Yep. Resources are indeed. I mean, I think this is one of the things that we were talking earlier about how, the pandemic has made our engagements at TESOL so international because now it's more accessible financially.
Absolutely. Hmm.
And that's, if nothing else could be said, that's one shining light that came out
Yep.
from this very, very challenging year, to
Just
say
true.
the least. Let's go into the research too. Again, Ayman. I mean, we're going to open it up pretty soon to questions and answers from our dear audiences here. But one of the three, I mean, there are many challenges, obviously, but there are three that I'm going to raise, and you can choose one or more to engage in them. One, obviously, we mentioned the idea, the invisibility, and whether or not it's there, and what could be the cause if it's there. The other is, I thought it was really interesting too. You mentioned financial turf lines. The turf lines between people who donate resources, like, for instance, the U.S. Embassy, the British Council. They all have agendas and they all have turf lines, and navigation through them is tensed. And it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts about that. The other is I thought also that was really an interesting comment or a finding that you have in your research, is that one is whether or not international participation was sought or desired by the conferences that Africa ELTA is associated with, the LTAs that you are associated with. Whether I mean, this resonates with me, because it raises the question as to whose voice are we trying to advocate in terms of the work of Language Teacher Association. So those three: invisibility, we talked about. The other is the turf lines between donors, us, or sponsors, and the third is the voices. Whose voices are we, you know, uh, are we engaging in? Are we carrying on somebody else's agenda, or are we, is the association working hard to create boundaries to make sure that African voices are the voices heard?
Okay. Great questions. Thank you, Farida. And I
Great
will
research, Ayman.
I will start by the last point about the voices. So when we established Africa TESOL, we made it very clear from the beginning that this body is going to serve African teachers, and the voices of African teachers must and should be highlighted. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we made a deliberate choice that whenever we choose a plenary speaker, this plenary speaker has to either come from Africa, from the continent, or to have African origins, so that the voices of Africans are are heard. Also, when we vet the presentation proposals, we tend to prioritize those that come from Africa so that we give more visibility and voice to African teachers and researchers to participate in our events. As far as our affiliates, I have been to a couple of their events, and many of the presentations were given by African teachers. There is some international presence, and this international presence is usually sought so that it gives the conference a international flavor. So these international voices not only come from the West, but also they come from other African countries. And we have many examples of affiliates who are currently working during this pandemic to foster international collaborations that bring teachers together from different African countries. In terms of financial resources, we have always struggled with this aspect, as we don't have any a sponsor, or we don't have a regular donor that gives us money in order to be able to host and organize our events. There are two key players, which are the British Council and the US Embassy, the RELO of the US Embassy. So these two entities, in large, they collaborate with our affiliates, and they do not have any direct collaboration with us in terms of providing us with financial resources. The resources that they provide us would be for the local affiliate to organize the conference, because one feature of Africa ELTA is that the annual conference is held in a different African country every year. And that country will collaborate with the British Council, with the US Embassy, in order to support them to bring more teachers and give them resources in order to find a venue for the conference, so on and so forth. So this is our relationship with British Council and US Embassy. But we are very cognizant of the role that these external bodies play, and they may come with their own agenda. Therefore, in Africa ELTA, we don't engage in direct collaboration. If we did, then it would be very conditioned.
Give us an example of that condition. For example, in the past.
In the past, for example, we collaborated with British Council, and the collaboration involved supporting teachers from rural areas to come and attend the conference. And in return, we provided invitation to one of the British Council members to present at the conference as an invited speaker. So that's one example I can provide.
It's a very good example. It's a symbiotic relationship. Yeah. And so let's actually, we've come to a point whereby, we can open it up to questions and answers. And so we have a few here already in the chat room. And I think so keep sending your questions, or just jump in for those of you who are observing us, who are in the conference, webinar. But one of them right now is from someone, Ayman, that you may not know, Jeremy Ortloff in New York. is asking the question. Jeremy, you want to ask the question?
Yeah, let's hear your voice. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So go ahead and ask the question, Jeremy.
All right. So ideally, what would the visibility of ELTAs be like? So could you say more about that? Like, what would it look like ideally? If you could make it, if you had everything you needed, what would it ideally be like? Because you're talking about visibility and how in a lot of countries they're not visible. You said also in Africa, though, they are a little more visible. But what would it ideally be like, I guess?
Well, if I may jump in here, for me, the basic is to be reachable. For, you know, as I mentioned, I need to know about you and I need to have access, right? So if you're reachable, then you're visible to me, right? And for that, again, you gotta be somehow having so many different plans and so many different ways to be visible, to reach out to teachers, to communities, to do a lot of work in different ways, whether for research or for professional developments in terms of events or for providing, you know, field work, volunteers. There are so many ways, right? But be reachable. I mean, if I cannot, I cannot have a simple membership at least per se. How can I reach you, right? Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know if you
the
want
other
to.
thing is the issue of impact. So what impact do you have on the teachers that you are serving? So
Yeah.
if the teacher association is not impacting the work of the teachers, then it might as well be invisible.
Right, and then knowing that that seeing that impact, hearing about it, but that goes back to the reachability, kind of some type of communication that's not broken, it's just very consistent, I guess, type of communication.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you both mentioned and that converges with what Jeremy is saying is your community work, which is very, which I think is unique in making your impact and your work visible. And we have another, thank you, Jeremy. We have a question from Tabitha. Jump in anytime, okay? In terms of the conversation, everyone. So Tabitha has two questions. Tabitha, you want to take the floor?
Yeah, well, I think possibly I just missed the question at the beginning. So could you guys clarify the name change? I guess you changed the name to Africa ELTA, and what was the thought process behind that?
Yes, after several discussions with members and affiliate leaders, we thought that a name change is necessary to reflect who we are and what we do as an association. Therefore, we brainstormed several names and we came up with two. We presented them to the members to vote, and Africa ELTA is selected. ELTA stands for English Language Teachers Association. So basically, we want to be closer to our affiliates because many of our affiliates have English Language Teacher Association in their name. So we wanted to have close affinity and an identity that is close to their identity as well, so they don't view us as alien. This is one reason for the name change. Another reason is the word association is important for us because we are an association, and therefore we wanted to include that in the name as well. So these are the motivations behind the name change. So it went from Africa TESOL to Africa ELTA. And I see here in the audience, Amira Salama, who is the Vice President of Africa TESOL. And I would like to invite her to also provide an input on the name change.
Thank you, Ayman. I'm enjoying the discussion actually and the questions. And I love the fact that we are talking about teacher associations because most of the time We attend the events organized by teacher associations, but we rarely talk about what we do and what we stand for as associations. I think you mentioned the two important reasons we thought of when we were thinking about changing our name. Also, because we have some affiliates in Africa that carry the name TESOL, being affiliated to TESOL International, and we as a regional body are not affiliated to TESOL International, so the name was somehow misleading to some of our affiliates. And I think with the idea of involving members in the selection and the choice of the name, this gave them more ownership because Africa TESOL started at the beginning before we had a board by Okan and Ayman, and the name choice was not up to the members. So we thought as we are expanding now on activities, it would make sense for us to think of giving this a chance to our members to feel more ownership by choosing the name themselves, and also choosing a name that would reflect better our activities and what we would like to do in the future.
Yes, and now as a member of Africa TESOL, to what Amira just said, and also Ayman, the idea of identity is very, very important. And could you, Ayman or Amira, remind what was the other option I voted? And I voted for Africa Alta, as a matter of fact. And I'm very happy that it's the one.
Africa ELT.
Africa ELT Africa, I believe, because the main reason for me that I picked this, it was to start with Africa, with the word Africa itself, and highlight that identity of the association, then the purpose and the mission, that goes with the mission and what the association does. And like Amira mentioned, Khan and Ayman, and you know that Ayman, Africa, it was just an idea. It was unbelievable. Nobody believed that this could ever happen in the first place with a zero budget. And Ayman and Khan has spent a lot of money from their own pockets, right? And there was no support at all. The idea itself, like, okay, you're gonna bring in all these, regional associations and come up with Africa TESOL. I do know so many people who didn't support us, but I do remember also one person that I'd like to thank is Dina Borai. Dr. Dina Borai was the person in Toronto 2015 where Okan and I were distributing, all the very initial plan that Ayman and Okan came up with, and the idea and the list of countries that they talked to that agreed potentially to be included if this happens. She's the only person who contributed from her time and effort and spent a lot of time with us and helped a lot introduce, stakeholders and other people to talk to us. Even though she wasn't really convinced with the money part too, she was scared, which is a concern, right? But thank you, Dr. Dina, for that. And yes, so Africa means a lot to us, and the name of Africa itself being at the beginning, I think as a member, means a lot, and the idea of ownership, choosing as well. Yeah.
It's amazing to me, 2015, so recent. Oh my goodness.
And
how many years have we been in the profession, right?
And a lot has been done. I mean, for the achievements in this short period of time. Absolutely, guys.
It blows my mind to think about the monumental work that you all did, to bring this together. It's the subject of another paper, another research article. So Tabitha had another question. Tabitha?
Yeah, thank you, Farida. Or really the subject of a book. I think you guys have a book to write here. Not to give you another task to do.
Where are you coming in from, Tabitha?
I'm in Annapolis, Maryland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed hearing from Ayman and Shadia and Amira about kind of the genesis of the organization especially, but I'm wondering about your vision for the future. What do you see Africa ELTA? What do you see for the future of the organization?
That's a great question. Thank you, Tabitha. The future is in our vision and mission which is to continue to contribute to English language teaching in Africa and to contribute to the professional development of teachers in Africa. There are a lot of challenges, but we are determined that we overcome these challenges in order to be able to reach as many African teachers in the African continent as possible. And we would also like to work on international collaborations. Currently, we have collaborations with a few different international bodies, and we would like to continue that. We would also like to empower our members, and currently we are working on 2 projects. The first one concluded already, which was a research project that was conducted after our conference in Nigeria in 2019. And the project involved classroom research, whereby some members, some participants from the conference opted for participating in a research group, and the outcome of this research group is a joint publication by Africa TESOL and IATEFL Research SIG, as well as Global Issues SIG. Another project that we are currently working on and we would like to continue in the future is mentoring of female teachers. Currently, we are working with Equal Voices in ELT. It's an organization based in the UK, and we are mentoring 8 classroom teachers to become conference presenters. And we would like to engage with these kinds of projects more and continue in the future to offer and be of value, help, and support to our members. If Farida allow me, I would like to invite Harry Kucha, who is the current president of IATEFL and one of Africa ELTA advisors. We have 2 advisors, Harry Kucha and Okon Efyong. So I would like to invite Harry to say a few words about the question that you raised, Tabitha, in terms of future as well.
Sorry, I'm not sure what hello, Jeremy. I've been quietly just
on the
spot. You did. I've been very quietly just listening and enjoying the different interactions. And I've come from a teacher association culture myself. I worked my early years as a teacher were in a very remote part of my country. In fact, I still remember, I think it's yesterday, I was chatting with friends and telling them how I had a friend at the post office who used to call me once a year to the post office, and he would connect the telephone to the minister. They had a local minister there. So he was the only one who had a direct phone line. We couldn't communicate. I couldn't communicate with my parents. So he would connect that. We would nick his phone line so I could speak to my parents when he knew the minister was not at home and not using his lines. That was how difficult it was. But my only comfort was with working with other teachers, colleagues like me, mourning our misery together, but also finding ways to develop and working especially with our students and learning from them. So I started out, it's a teacher association that made me visible from a very local level with a small group in a village, well, in a small town in the north of Cameroon, and then becoming a member of the regional association, and then later on a member of the national association, where I became Secretary General and then President, a Vice President in charge of international outreach. And it's within that time that my local association became an affiliate of TESOL and an associate of IATEFL. So teacher associations are quite an important part of my life. my professional life. And one of the things about teacher associations that I think it's been mentioned, but in terms of visibility that I thought wasn't mentioned, is the fact how they become even more visible and stronger if institutions offer them the space to contribute to policy and practice development in context. Now, I'll take an example of the Camelta research group in Cameroon, which started out from the association itself. And this was a group of young teachers in their first to fifth year of teaching, deciding to work collaboratively to do collaborative classroom research in a very basic way, not even in the way that has been conceptualized by experts in action research and exploratory practice. It was just sharing good practice, observing each other, interviewing each other's students, developing classroom processes together with their students. But now they are an essential part of the pre-service teacher education. So the University College of Education in the capital, where high school teachers are trained, has now been working over the last 2 years, I think, working closely with them. And so even pre-service teachers are beginning to join the group and are feeling more confident to express themselves, to talk and to reflect on the profession. And I think little steps like this, where teacher associations can grow to a point where they are part of pre-service teacher education, they are recognized by ministries. For example, Camelta has a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Secondary Education, because by law in Cameroon, and that's different in many countries, that it is an association, the boss of the association is the Ministry of Territorial Administration, not the ministry that looks after the work of that association. So they are just partners with the Ministry of Secondary Education. They are not under, they don't have that subordinate role with the ministry. They have a partnership which clearly identifies what each partner brings to the table. And little things like that, giving them that space can help. Now, back to the question about the vision. I think Emin mentioned two big projects that that Africa TESOL has been involved in. And part of that has been the partnership with IETFL Research Special Interest Group, IETFL Global Issues Group, and the Young Learners Interest Group. So we have each, we have worked with each of these special interest groups on strategic areas leading to our Africa TESOL's or Africa ELTA's development plan. But the end point is to build leadership and expertise within the continent itself, because most of us are out of the continent and we are influenced by all sorts of things. And sometimes we tend to be impatient with the way things are going on the continent. But these professionals know what's happening on the ground. They face the day-to-day realities in a way that we don't. So sometimes our brilliant ideas might just be ideal ideas in an ideal world that are disconnected from their reality. So building this kind of leadership and independent thinking within the continent itself is something that I think Africa ELTA is striving to do, because they are not going to be dependent on us or ideas coming from Africans from the diaspora. There would be a time, and the transition is happening already. We've had, in our 5 years already, we're going to be having our first female president. I don't think that happened in TESOL or Africa or even IETFL within the first 5 years of their being. We're going to have a female president. We already have half the bureau is made up of female and half of males, and the number of Africans in the diaspora in the leadership has been dwindling, and we're getting out of it. So all of that is part of the long-term vision, developing expertise and leadership from within the continent itself.
Incredible. Well said. It's incredible. What an insight we're getting from you, Henry, in terms of what's happening there. What else is there that we did not talk about, Ayman and Shadia, in terms of, the next steps for Africa TESOL, Africa ELTA, that we do not, or any other thing that, actually, sorry, it's Harry. I said Henry, didn't I?
That's okay.
So, what is it that, I mean, I think Harry raised something that is something that I hope you can talk about, something that we don't often know from, the North American side of things in terms of what's happening in Africa TESOL, in Africa ELTA. What are some of the concerns or the things that you want to kind of have addressed in the future that we don't often hear about? Ayman or Shadia or
Yes.
Harry or Amira?
Yeah, one of the things that are not addressed in international context when dealing with Africa is the context, the local context. And this is one of the impetuses for establishing Africa ELTA, is to provide work that is contextually relevant to the teachers in Africa, because they grapple with different issues from what teachers grapple with in the West. So this is one area that we have been working on and would like to continue to work on in the future in order to help them develop and grow professionally.
Mm-hmm. Amira, Harry, or Shadia?
I think I'm going to talk about something sensitive that not everybody would bring up in here, which is and the research related to this. I call it cultivating our potentials, our own potentials, and that meet our own needs, right? And then the research that Ayman and Okan has conducted is when the participants expressed, made comments about international participation versus national participation, right? And as much as I hate, to use the dichotomy of native versus non-native speakers, and I understand why some participants would express maybe a preference of national participation as opposed to an international one, because I believe this relates to the fact that, it's been this, not everybody, but it's very common that native speakers have been privileged over non-native speakers within language associations without being necessarily more competent. So for example, having, a mere passport of, from an English speaking country, not as a double national, even sometimes if you have both, you would be not privileged as well. Or having a certificate to CELTA, Delta, for instance, would put that person in not only the privilege of being hired, right, but also excluding more competent others, but also with networking. But also with the privilege of, with their own networking, they have that privilege of the native speaker profile. So for language associations, that is the profile that is, been attractive, maybe, I don't know, for many, not only English, even Arabic as well. I'll give an example for that. And that person is claimed to be the source of knowledge, right? Who knows better and is therefore as an international scholar, right? To educate the locals, right? Or even teachers whose national language is English, like in many African countries, but could belong to or be classified as underprivileged countries or communities. So basically, bottom line, this superiority that comes in different facets has been, for many members. And I say that because I do talk a lot as an EFL IS leaders for 3 years and different other capacities, so internationals. I do have so many, members of the EFL IS from Africa or elsewhere Africa, from the underprivileged communities. And that's their concern. Bring this other person, to educate us, whereas we do have the potential and we do have so many locals and nationals that there are, or could be, if, through the events like the mentoring that Africa ELTA right now have been doing, and their collaboration with, the Harry was talking about, the projects could be done. You are mentoring, you are cultivating, you are seeking ways to find those, teachers with potential and with the knowledge to be producers of knowledge and to be leaders in a sustainable way from your own context and that understands your own needs.
Well, I think, Shadia,
You know?
you're getting some applause here from attendees in terms of saying, what's at the back of my mind, back of many minds at this point in time. And this is one of the purposes of the TEIS webinar series, which is to celebrate the achievements and the research and the work and the practice of people, who work in their countries. And so, all of those things resonate with so many of us here in attendance. And so thank you, everyone. We've come to 11 o'clock at this point in time, the end of the hour. Is there anything you want to say last, Diamond?
I would like to say that we have faced and we are facing many challenges, and some of them were mentioned by Harry, which relates to the African diaspora having control over the affairs of Africa TESOL. But gradually, as we engage in this process of leadership training, this overhead from Africa TESOL, Africa ELTA members who exist outside of Africa will be dwindling, and the leadership will be transferred smoothly to leaders from within the continent.
And I would just like to add that, yes, that is our priority, but also we're not really extremes, right? Just to make things clear. Yeah, right. We do value, global knowledge as well, and globalism and being part of the world. And that's important for us. So we do appreciate and welcome international participation in different ways. But we are here. This participation and selection is not a mere privilege, it's or networking or anything, but it's based on merits and only merits, and a mentality of a mutual collaboration and mutual status. We both learn from each other, so nobody's superior. We're mutual collaborators. Yeah.
That's an excellent way to end the conversation. Unless Harry, you have, or Amira, you have one last thing to say, or before we go?
I just wanted to pick on Chadia's very well articulated point, because I feel this in international collaborations at an individual level, but also at the level of associations. There is, and I also believe that every social injustice needs, to break every social injustice, we need our allies. We often need allies to break every form of social injustice. A long time ago, I was reminded when I was a national inspector in my country that I was a nobody when a British Council teacher said something about quality education in Cameroon. And this was someone with a CELTA who knew nothing about the context itself. So there is an in-home grown through years of imperialism and all of that. There is also an inbuilt system that we need to be breaking for people to think that the best ideas about what to do would have to come from outside. And so we find that I've often found a very thin line between the an external expert collaborating and one patronizing. And you would find that sometimes people would be more aligned to listen to what someone says, someone with another background says, rather than someone they are very used to and who understands their context. That happens. But for me, I think those of us following this session, my appeal would be, let's be ambassadors of Africa ELTA and try to support Africa ELTA to empower itself rather than being or rather than being continuously dependent on outsiders. There is also Herman talked about funding. That's a very serious problem we have. And how do we compete, for example, with the British Council or with the American relos who have all the money and so can tell us, as in an example, that we cannot survive as a nation, as an international association. We need to break up into regional associations and actively promoting and funding regional splits within Africa. That's something that has happened in the past. And I think these are little things that we need to be to be careful about and to keep watch that they don't, that our lack of funding doesn't make the rich try to manipulate or crush Africa ELTA in the way it's been attempted before.
Well, you can be rest assured that you have, I mean, we have an audience here, an international audience here, and you have allies here. And I think, I think we speak in a unified voice in a way that, whatever is possible for us, in ways that are possible for us to support you, we will try to find channels to do so. And this is one way of, through this webinar series that we're doing. So, trying to provide voice and trying to also unify. So we thank you for your attendance here and for sharing your thoughts and ideas, your heart and soul with our membership. And I thank everyone for being here and have a good end of 2020.
Hope so.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much,
Thank you,
Farida.
Farida.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. Happy New Year,
Bye.
everybody.
Happy New Year.
Holidays and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Yeah.